Hey gardeners, let's talk about a question that I get asked all the time, and that is when to pick your tomatoes, because waiting for that perfect vine ripened tomato can be absolutely magical, but it can also quickly turn into a disaster if you wait too long. So today I want to talk about how to time your tomato harvest so you get optimal flavor, but you avoid disappointments from pests, splitting, and other common things that can happen to our tomatoes as we allow them to vine ripen. The timing of your harvest is key to getting the most out of your tomato plant, whether we're talking about cherries or beefsteaks or heirloom varieties. These same basic rules are going to apply to all of these different types. And if you've ever heard that grocery store tomatoes don't taste the same as vine ripened tomatoes, that's absolutely true. There is nothing better than a vine ripened tomato. It has an unbeatable, unmatched flavor because it's allowed to ripen on the vine. When we go to the grocery store and we get tomatoes from the grocery store, those are picked green. Because they're picked green, because they're not allowed to ripen on the vine, they don't have that same intense tomato flavor profile that your homegrown vine ripened tomatoes do. But here's where things can get tricky. It's important to balance when to pick your tomatoes for optimal flavor with when to pick them to avoid splitting and pests and all kinds of other things that can happen. Because as a tomato is ripening on the vine, it's getting its deep red, beautiful color, it tastes amazing. Well, your birds, your squirrels, and a lot of other pests are gonna wanna snack on them just like you do. But when we see a tomato begin to show its true hue of color, it's at full size and that color has just begun to start, this is called the breaker stage, or some people will call it the blushing stage. And at this point, it's technically begun to ripen. So it's safe to pick here and allow it to ripen on the counter inside. Now, I will say that if you allow it to fully ripen on the vine, that flavor is going to be even more intense. It's going to be even better than pulling it early and letting it ripen on the counter. However, this is the best stage to be able to protect that harvest and still get that vine ripened tomato flavor. Like I alluded to earlier, if you allow your tomato to continue ripening on the vine because you're intent on getting that perfect full tomato flavor, which I know sometimes I do this, there are a lot of things that can go wrong and there's some things to watch out for. One is splitting. So tomatoes, a really common problem with tomatoes is that as they've reached full size, full maturity, and they've begun the ripening process, if there's a heavy rain or if you're overwatering, that tomato fruit can actually split. Another common problem is going to be your birds. Birds like tomatoes because they're full of water, they're full of juice. So if birds are thirsty, they will actually peck at a tomato just to pull the juice from it. Squirrels will take your tomatoes right off the plant just because they can. There are a lot of bugs that like tomatoes, especially as we get into the heat of summer, into the main growing season. You're gonna have a lot of pest pressure, and there are bugs that specifically love tomatoes. So, true horror story that I just had happen to me. I was waiting for the very first tomato of the season to ripen. And I came out here in the evening and I saw the tomato was turning orange. It's a red tomato, but it was turning orange. It was really beautiful. It was at full size. And I was thinking, you know, maybe I should go ahead and harvest this. But I decided to wait until the next day. And lo and behold, that next morning when I came out, the tomato had been attacked by a bird. Something else to watch out for as we're trying to allow our tomatoes to ripen on the vine is that they can become overripe really quickly, and then they're gonna be mushy and gross. And this is really disappointing after all the time and waiting we put in to allowing them to ripen. So when it comes to the signs you should look for that tell you it's time to pick those tomatoes is it should be at its full size. This is really important. Also, it should have begun to turn to its mature color. You may not see that full color forming as of yet, but you want at least the hue of it. You want at least it blushing. You want at least it starting to look like its mature color. And when you touch it, it should be kind of firm, but have a little bit of give. It should also easily detach from the plant. If it stays stuck to the plant, that's probably a good indication that it's not ready to pick. But if you're unsure if it's ready or not, and you want to protect your harvest, it's probably best to err on the side of picking it early and allowing it to ripen on the counter. Tomatoes picked at this breaker stage or blushing stage can ripen indoors quite beautifully, and they're going to taste pretty good because, again, we've allowed them to begin the ripening process on the plant. As the tomato is on the vine, it's pulling sugars and nutrients from that vine, and that is what gives it that robust tomato flavor. A lot of people think it's the sun, and while the sun does play a part, it's actually that connection to the vine that really brings that intense tomato flavor that we all love and crave. If you're harvesting your tomatoes and you're allowing them to ripen on the counter, don't let them touch. Put them on a plate or a tray and kind of keep them separated. A lot of people will take them and put them directly in the fridge. But the thing about this is, while it does preserve the tomato a little bit, that cold of the fridge can actually dull the flavor. So we don't want to put them in the fridge until we need to, like until we need to preserve them and keep them from going bad. But the best option really is to allow them to ripen on the counter, to allow them to sit on the counter until you're ready to use them. And if you want to speed up that ripening process, a cool tip is actually to add a banana nearby. Now, don't let it touch the tomato, but add it close by, and this will help, or so it's said, that this will help the ripening process speed up just a little bit. So some quick tomato harvesting facts. Can tomatoes still ripen if they fall off the vine? The answer to this is yes. So I have a heavy mulch laid down on my garden beds. At times a wind can come through, or like a heavy storm or something like that, and I may have tomatoes that fall off the vine. If there's no damage to them and there's no bugs nearby, I will actually pick these up and allow them to ripen on the counter. They will still ripen usually, but it's really best if they've at least begun to change color. And what about when it comes to fully green tomatoes? Can those be picked and allowed to ripen indoors? The answer to this is yes. A lot of times this is exactly what happens with your grocery store tomatoes. But again, the flavor profile of a tomato picked green is not going to be the same as a tomato that's been allowed to ripen on the vine. It's also important to note that when you pick a green tomato, you want to make sure it's at its full mature size. This is really important because if it's not gotten to its full mature size, a lot of times it won't ripen. It will just stay green and hard and then rot. And when it comes to fried green tomatoes, you want to make sure that you're using the larger tomatoes to do this. Most of your smaller varieties just aren't going to hold up or stand up as well to the frying process. For that optimal, perfect tomato flavor, there's a really important time during the day that you should pick your tomatoes. Most people will say do your harvesting in the mornings or the evenings, and that's true for most plants, right? Because the heat of the day is not a time we want to harvest most things. It will stress out the plant. The complete and total opposite is true when it comes to tomatoes. When it comes to tomatoes, you want to harvest them in the middle of the day, in the hottest part of the day. That time of the day that you do not want to be outside because the sun is just beating down on you. That is when the sugars in the tomato are going to be the most concentrated and you're going to have the best tomato flavor. A lot of times I will actually look forward to this heat of summer just to get that perfect tomato flavor. I will pick it directly in the garden in the middle of the day and I will eat it before I even go back inside. So what happens if you pick your tomatoes too early or if you pick them too late? Well, if you pick them too early and you're afraid that they may not ripen, give them a little bit of time. Set them on the counter and see if they're gonna ripen. Don't toss them out right away because they still could ripen, even if they aren't quite at that mature size. Best practice is, again, make sure they're at that mature size, but it is possible for them to ripen even if they're picked a little small or even if they're picked a little bit too early. You'll know if you've picked your tomatoes too late because they're gonna be really soft. They might be a little bit mushy. In this case, as long as they're not rotting or they don't smell bad, you can use them right away. This is going to be a tomato that you're not going to put in the fridge to use for later. You're going to use it directly in sauces or stews most of the time. These aren't going to be as good cut up in your salads. You can do that, but they're just not going to be as good cut up in your salads or for fresh eating, but they'll still be really great in your sauces and your stews. And if you're really intent on getting that perfect vine ripened tomato, just make sure that you're watching out for birds. Just make sure there's no heavy rain in the forecast. And if you want to chance it, go ahead, because to be honest with you, that perfect vine ripened tomato flavor is unmatched and unbeatable. All right, quick recap on our best practices. Pick at that breaker or blushing stage. Try to protect your tomatoes from birds and other pests. You can actually put a bird bath nearby, and that may deter a lot of your birds from messing with your tomatoes because, again, they're probably just looking for water. And allow your tomatoes to fully ripen indoors on the counter at room temperature. Do not put them in the fridge. This will dull the flavor. Pick your tomatoes in the hottest part of the day. that late morning, early afternoon time frame. And try harvesting some of your tomatoes green and having fried green tomatoes. If you've never had this, I dare you to try it and make a homemade aioli sauce to go with it, which is mayonnaise, garlic, and saffron and lemon juice if you have that. If not, you can substitute paprika for the saffron, but there's nothing that beats saffron in your aioli. And make sure you're checking your tomatoes daily to protect your harvest, because this ripening process can happen really quickly once it's begun. And if you have any tomato harvesting stories, please share them in the comments below. Let me know, what is your favorite tomato? I'm gonna leave some links in the description box below to some of my favorite gardening products. Now, these are affiliate links, so I do earn a small commission if you purchase through them, but there's no additional cost to you, and I'm only putting in things that I think might be helpful, especially if you're a first-year gardener. So check those out. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. I thank you guys so much for watching. I'm gonna leave a video on your screen until the next one comes out. May your garden be full of grace. May you be abundantly blessed. We'll see you next time. Bye.